In reality, one is totally separated from the pleasure of sex in any sexual activity, from beginning to end. Imagine a man looking at the body of a woman. He experiences a particular feeling in his mind, a pleasure, an excitement, an attraction, a motivation to look more at or to do something with that body. He believes it is he who pleasures. He feels that the taste of this feeling is from him, attached to him, is part of him, and is his own. But is this right? No, it is not. That feeling is not coming from his I or his sense of I-ness. It is coming from another source. When you look at that beautiful face, it is not you who forms the beauty of that eye or lip or chin. It is your brain that forms and defines that beauty. Without your brain and its neural networks, you have no idea what is or is not beautiful. Other than saying, "She is beautiful," we should say, "She is beautifuled." Forming this beauty is a magical trick that our brain has learned during the evolutionary process to fool us. This is a very clear biological fact, isn't it? Imagine how beauty is formed or defined for cockroaches or lizards. The way they define or see beauty in their beloved ones looks terribly different from the way we define or see beauty in a young woman. But that's fine. That's the way that works for their brains to fool them, just as this is the way that works for our brains to fool us. It is the brain that is responsible for this task, and it does this in a way that is similar to the way a magician does magic, by creating illusions. Our illusionist brain creates that lady and all of her beauty. We just watch our brain's performance, its wonderful magic, and are fooled by its beauty illusion show. The beauty or physical attraction we see or feel in the opposite gender is not a real thing. It is something absolutely created and defined and formed by the brain, then tagged onto that curvature, convexity, or concavity of those pieces of bone, flesh, and fat. The above discussion was about what is called sex and sexuality, not love. Regarding love, let's just say you don't love her, she is loved. You don't like her, she is liked. Fortunately or unfortunately, that is the way it works. This fundamentally changes many things. Think about it. As a side note, let me clarify that I am not trying to blame or devaluate sexual behavior or activity. It is a natural instinct and a result of the body's evolution, a tool without which we could not survive. To make my point even clearer, I am not trying to ask you to look at sexual behavior as a joyless or pleasureless activity. First of all, it is not you who creates that joy, and you also don't have the power to remove the joy from that activity. It is your body and its brain that are responsible for whatever relates to this complex procedure. This is true not only for sexual activity, but for the joy of eating, listening to music, swimming, and any other healthy natural bodily activity. Second, there is no need to manipulate any natural healthy bodily behavior to connect to what I am discussing in this book. In order to follow my argument, observation is the only important and necessary exercise that one needs to practice. It is essential to understand, to observe, and to experience this separation of the I from whatever belongs to the body. So long as one has not felt his or her presence in the mental space, and so long as one has not learned to practice the skill of observing the internal mental activities, it is merely his thought that actually lives, not his self. With this lack of self-awareness, thought takes the place of self. More precisely, the person imagines that his being is the same as his thoughts. He thinks that he exists because his thoughts exist. He mistakenly regards the stream of thinking as the collectivity of the self. It is only after realizing a deep sense of presence that a person comes alive and into being, as if he did not exist before, and it is only now that he has come to life. At this moment, astonished, he will ask himself, who was the one that has been living in me so far, and has owned my body and psyche? It is only at this moment, after feeling that presence, that one vividly feels for the very first time the absence and non-beingness state he has been in so far. This is somehow similar to the difference between the quality of real physical sex and what one may experience in masturbation. Let me explain why I say that. Masturbation is a fake, untrue, and ludicrous mental activity that one performs to delude himself or herself into believing that some mind-created imaginary scenes are real. Compared to this, a bodily sexual activity is a physical, real, and genuine behavior for which the mind does not need to do anything other than consciously surrender to the natural flow. In natural physical sex, one does not need to imagine anything to keep the process alive. Instead, the whole body and all of its senses will be involved, and they know how to do their job in harmony, so long as you do not interfere with the natural procedure. As is true for any other genuine activity, such as eating, dancing, listening to music, and so on, thinking can only ruin the joyful feeling of real physical sex by interfering with the natural flow. Contrarily, in masturbation, almost everything is done by the mind, so basically it can be described as the mind making love with itself. It is essentially different from the genuine activity performed by two physical bodies when all their physical senses are actively and harmonically involved. As a side note, even when one is involved in physical sex but uses the mind and imagination to motivate the body to do things, I would describe this as masturbation rather than as genuine sex. Having said all this, I believe that it should be clear by now why I say that the difference between living in presence and living in absence is similar to the difference between real physical sex and masturbation. After practicing self-awareness and feeling the sense of presence, one realizes that, up to now, he has not been living life, but rather masturbating life. I would like to emphasize that I am not discussing these topics from an ethical perspective. Basically, this discussion is not in the same category as think positively or love thy neighbor as thyself. By saying this, I do not mean to deny or oppose what is called morality or religion. I only intend to clarify that our discussion is not based on ethical points of view. It is logical and, more importantly, experiential. In other words, this argument can be experienced without any need for ethereal explanations, philosophical justifications, or religious and metaphysical beliefs. For example, in order to know the effect that water has on quenching thirst, you just need to drink the water. To know that fire burns the skin, you only have to put your hand in the fire. We do not use ethical, philosophical, or religious arguments in such cases, not because we necessarily have a problem with the arguments, but because the issue at hand is an empirical one that can only be realized through experience. Another important reason for stating so emphatically that our discussion is not about ethics was implicitly stated earlier. That is, we are not concerned here with the type or nature of the contents of the mind, but rather with observing these contents as they are in order to understand what is going on there. In ethical discussions, the goal is to modify the mind's contents to conform to a specific ethical or religious system, but that is not our aim in this discussion. For instance, the immediate goal here is not to practice observation in order to change hatred into love or stinginess into generosity. Instead, the first step here is to practice passive observation because we understand that willing to change the mind's contents makes it impossible to practice genuine observation. In fact, it will ruin it. Imagine that someone randomly pops up in my mind at a certain moment, a process that usually happens unconsciously and is beyond my intention or control. Depending on who this person is, a range of diverse feelings may be evoked in my mind. For example, recalling my son or daughter evokes a different feeling from the one that is evoked when I recall my uncle, a neighbor, Abraham Lincoln, or Vincent van Gogh. These feelings can range from love and respect to hatred, rivalry, inferiority, superiority, or many other possibilities. When I maintain that ethics are irrelevant to my discussion, I mean that I am not focusing on ways to control or modify these feelings, but just wanting to see what is going on there. To attain self-knowledge, we have no way other than to open the unconscious box of the mind and look at its contents under the light of awareness. It is pointless to try to do anything else first. What do you want to do with your mind when you don't yet know what it is made of, how it works, and why it works this way or that way? No one else can do this for you, simply because there is no way for them to get into that land and do this discovery for you. Even if we imagine that someone has access to that space, he or she cannot do this for you. No one can take yourself and exercise your self-awareness on your behalf. Genuine gurus know that self-knowledge emerges only after one consciously realizes a crystal-clear self-awareness. No tool, no drug, no human being, and no God can help you on this path. Nothing can replace your own self-awareness.